Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine 18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. I am here with a VR to Luna over at Water Moon Cards and her video Deck Recheck. I will link to Luna's original video and her accompanying blog post in the description box below. The idea of Deck Recheck is to look at a few decks in our collections that we, for one reason or another, have not been using lately, and to consider why that is. So in terms of the structure of the tag, Luna has given 3 prompts to help choose a deck, so 3 decks total to discuss. And then for each of those decks, there are 3 questions to answer. One question is how or why you acquired the deck in the first place. The second question is why you think you haven't been using it, or why you haven't been using it lately. If there's something that you think is keeping you from using it, just kind of discuss that. And then the third prompt is something that you could do to maybe work with the deck more, bring it back into rotation, or to address an issue if you feel like there is an issue that is causing you not to use the deck, right? So that could be something like, if the deck's unwieldy size is getting in the way of your enjoyment of the deck, maybe that means you want to trim the deck, for example, right? But not using a particular deck may or may not be something that one sees as a problem. So there's a lot of room for a lot of different ideas and experiences in this tag, which I really, really like. So I have chosen 3 decks. And I have to say, I like them all very much. So, when I sat down to think about this tag and the decks that I would talk about, I was in some sense surprised where I ended up. And maybe you'll be surprised where I ended up. We'll see. So, deck number 1 is to be a deck that I have not used in a while, that I've never used at all, or that I have not used much since I got it. I have used this deck. There's no deck in my collection that I've never used at all. But this is a deck that I am somewhat surprised to say I have really not used much. And I've had it for quite a while, and I have not used it much since I got it. And that is actually the Inkwitch Tarot. So this deck, I'm not going to go through each of the 3 questions as like a number 1, 2, 3, but I'll try to cover everything for each of the 3 decks. So in terms of how and when I got this via a Kickstarter that funded in very late 2023 and fulfilled in very early 2024. So I've had it for a couple of years. This is the 2nd edition. I didn't know this deck existed when the 1st edition was out and about, but I was happy to get the 2nd. In terms of why I acquired it, I was familiar with the artist's work through The Endless Oracle, which I really, really like and use a lot and have used a lot. And so when I saw that he was going to release a tarot deck, or re-release a tarot deck, I guess, I jumped right on it. This is a really cool deck. And something that's interesting about it is that there are kind of expansion packs with extra cards. So there are different versions, for example, of a lot of the cards with either with or without renamings, or with different configurations of gender presentation in some of the cards. So some different titles. So I went all in on this campaign, and I got the expansion packs. I spent time going through and choosing, which of the different variants of each card that I wanted to keep in the deck. And from there, I used it some when I got it, but not much. And why I haven't used it, I know the reason. And the reason I haven't used it is because the artist soon afterwards put out a new deck, the Endless Tarot. And because I found his work via the Endless Oracle, you know, I knew I wanted to get the Endless Tarot. I think the Endless Oracle was one of the best oracles to come out that year. I think it's brilliant. I think his book is really good. I can't say enough good things about it. It's wintry, which is unusual for my collection. Really, really like it. And this Endless Oracle goes with it perfectly. And so I've been pairing them. They have a similar fantasy world kind of vibe to them. The Endless Oracle actually had a Legend of Zelda expansion, which I think is great. These decks are gorgeous, and they're gorgeous together, and they also, you know, are great to work with on their own. I'm someone who likes to pair decks, but not for every reading necessarily. I use both Endless Tarot and Endless Oracle independently and together. But because I have been so enamored with the Endless Tarot and the Endless Oracle, I think the result of that has been that the Inkwitch Tarot has kind of fallen by the wayside. I haven't used it as much as maybe as I would like to. I'm catching myself there. I almost was going to say something like I haven't used it as much as I should. I don't actually think in that kind of normative way. So there's not a should attached to something like this, but you know, this is a beautiful deck too, and it's not you know, it's not just like a substitute for the Endless Tarot. I think I need to think about it in its own terms. So in terms of the last question that we have for each of the decks, which is some way we could address or change if we want to, you know, the fact that we haven't been using a particular deck. I think this one, I just need to get this out. And I think maybe I could play with some pairs for the deck. Specifically some pairs that are not the Endless Oracle. Because initially I was pairing this with the Endless Oracle, but then the Endless Tarot arrived and that just took its place in a sense. I think this one needs its own pairs. If you have this deck, let me know what you pair it with. I also wonder, and this probably sounds ridiculous to at least some of you, I think I might need to reconfigure where things are on my tarot shelf so that the Inkwitch and the Endless Tarot are not beside each other. Because they're quite different decks, really. They have different feelings, like very different feelings. They do share this kind of color palette that the artist clearly quite likes, and I like as well, but they really are not similar. So maybe putting them beside each other is causing it to feel like I have to pick one or the other, and I could move it on my shelf to resolve that issue. I do plan to use this more, and identifying that I hadn't used it in quite a while has just in and of itself, this tag has made me want to get this out more, so I feel good about that. The second deck that I want to talk about, the prompt is to choose an oldie but goodie deck that was once something that we used regularly but fell out of rotation. So the deck that I've chosen for that is another deck that I think is fantastic, that I really, really like, and that I've had many good readings with, but I have not used in quite a long time. And that is the Hoodoo Tarot by Tiana Lee McQuiller. This is a mass market deck. I bought this in May 2021, and I bought it from the Hermit's Lamp, which, if you're familiar with Toronto, you know the Hermit's Lamp is a store there. And I bought this in the context of Kim over at Abundant Life Tarot doing a study group series about this deck. And Kim has a whole playlist of videos talking through the different majors and looking at different aspects of the deck. Like, amazing contribution to TarotTube, I will say. Like, that series is fabulous. And so I worked with this quite a bit in the context of working through that study. I didn't get to do as much of the study as I would have liked because a lot of it was on Facebook and I don't use Facebook. I know that I missed out on a reading list that was posted on the Facebook group, and I'm like, it's not often that I wish I could view a Facebook group, but I would have liked that. So I think that this just kind of, in terms of this question of why I haven't been using it much, I think that I used it with such a frequency in the context of that deck study. You know, and I read the book cover to cover. I did some spreads from the book. I made this deck its own designated notebook for that. This was a deck as well that really gave me some readings that were really pivotal for me at the time that I was committing to Druidry. And Hoodoo is also a nature-based practice and tradition, right? It's a set of traditions. And this deck really impacted me at the time that I was working with it a lot. And so I think of it as a very special deck. And so in terms of why I haven't used it, I think it's really just that the study ended. And so I put it down because I'd been using it quite a lot and moved on to using other things. And it just kind of, made its way to the back of the shelf as decks can do. And I haven't had occasion to get the deck out again. I don't dislike it or anything like that. I think it's a fantastic deck. It just hasn't been one that I've used much recently. So in terms of the final question, how might I address this? How might I change this? How might I, find a way to integrate it back into my my reading practice? I actually have found the answer to that, and I'm excited about this. That is the Hoodoo Tarot Workbook. I have not worked through this. I bought this some time ago now. When I found out about it, I thought, yeah, of course I'll want to look at this, and I haven't done it yet. So once I'm done the current tarot book that I'm working through, which is Drea Bloom's tarot activity book, which I'm working through with the Fifth Spirit Tarot. I'm having a great time. Once I'm done that book, I'm going to make this my next tarot exploration, I think. And I think this will be great. So I've had a skim. A lot of it doesn't look very, very workbook to me necessarily. It feels like there's a lot of information, about different herbs and flowers, for example. Like, I feel like this will be a learn a lot kind of a book, but also there's activity components that I know I will enjoy. So that is what I will be doing there. The third deck, final deck for deck recheck, is to be a deck that makes you reassess something. And this is about as broad as it sounds. And Luna gives some examples of what this might mean in her video and in her blog post. This could be a deck that, pokes at you in some way, a deck that maybe makes you reassess your deck tastes because it's really different than your usual style. Like, there's a lot of room in terms of what this could mean. And this was the one that I struggled to choose, if I'm honest, because that reassess prompt I didn't know what I was going to do for that, but I've landed on something that I think makes sense. And this is a deck that I have not used in quite a long time at this point. And that is Cosmovisions by James R. Eads, who everyone will, of course, be familiar with. This is a really interesting deck. And this was a really epic Kickstarter. Check this gilding out. It is kind of iridescent. It's very cool. Those are the backs. So in terms of when and why and how I acquired this deck and brought it into my collection, this was a Kickstarter that funded in 2020, late 2020, and fulfilled early 2021. So I've had it for quite a number of years now. And this is a Kickstarter that had a lot of components, a lot of moving parts, a lot of stretch goals, and extras, you know. I don't remember what the total ended up being, but it was pretty massive. This is another one where I went, like I went in for everything on this campaign, which was not what I had initially planned to do when I backed the deck, but there was geomancy involved, so I went for it. And geomancy being involved is kind of the answer to the second prompt of, you know, why do I think I haven't used this deck much, or why haven't I not been using it lately? I think that there's two reasons. One is that the geomancy coins and the book, Geomantic Visions, that came with this this campaign ended up kind of being the highlight of the entire package for me. As a geomancy reader, there are not a lot of geomancy, you know, tools and different options out there. Like, of course, you know, you can use dice or different kinds of things like that, but it's not often that you get like a really special feeling geomancy tool like this. And so that kind of eclipsed the deck a little bit for me, if I'm honest. But the other reason is that what James has done in this deck is kind of reconfigure the court cards as a fifth suit unto themselves. So just pulling out a few of those cards here. We have cards like the Commander and the Geomancer and the Elementalist. And in the guidebook for the deck, these each correspond to a tarot court, but they're not named, as you can see on the cards, in a way that indicates which is which. So if I go into the little book, they're all together at the end. And so, for example, the Elementalist is corresponding to the King of Swords, right? But there's nothing here that tells us, there's not even a sword on the card, actually. There's nothing here that tells us that this is a King of Swords, right? I don't know that I think that this works very well, personally. He talks about these as 16 identities or personalities. Like, there are ways that this definitely mirrors the courts, but because they're not suited on the card itself, I find them difficult to read when I'm using my tarot brain. And this is an oracle, Cosmovision's oracle, but it does have a tarot structure in a lot of respects. It has a set of majors. The majors have frames around them. This is actually the bonus card, Sleeping Ships. But there's a set of majors that correspond to tarot majors. And then you have 4 suits with numbered cards. So here's the 6 of Embers for fire, for example. The 7 of Embers, 7 of Wands. Right? So it's just that tarot oracle mashup that I think is part of why I haven't used this as much, but it's really about the courts for me that I'm not convinced. And furthermore, what he has done is try to overlay the 16 geomancy figures onto this. So just going to the book for a second, I should have planned this and chosen one to focus on somehow. I'm going to try to find the Elementalist here just for a second. oh, here, let's use the Geomancer. So the Geomancer card here, as one of the 16 quartz, is also on one of the Geomancy coins and is associated with Fortuna Major. Fortuna Major, and as a quart, it is associated with the Queen of Pentacles. Now, there is a basis for this in that Fortuna Major has active water and earth lines, and active water and earth as a queen of the Queen of Pentacles. You know, you can see why that would make sense, I think. But I'm just not convinced that they all quite work in that way. So if we go to, I want to find the Elementalist here in the book. You're watching me flip through because I'm disorganized. Okay, where did it go? Why can I not find this one card? Why can I not find this one card? I'm not sure. Okay, let's try another one. This is the Commander. Again, the Commander. The Commander is associated with Carcer, the figure Carcer. The Commander is also associated with, for the Tarot Court, where did you go? These books are so tiny. Okay. The Commander is the King of Pentacles. And the King of Pentacles has active fire and earth, right? I do not buy that the 16 court cards correspond to the 16 Geomancy figures. I'm just gonna put it that way. To me, these are very different systems. And I think that the coins work well on their own. And in the book for the coins for the Geomancy system, it does not really lay in the tarot at all. So when you look at Fortuna Major, for example, it does describe it as the figure of the Geomancer. It explains meanings for Fortuna Major. It has planetary and bodily correspondences and things like this. It does not get into equating it with the tarot. And I think if it tried to, it would muddle Geomancy for people who aren't familiar with it. So I can't get past these quartz. I think that that's why I haven't used this, because otherwise it feels like a tarot, but the quartz don't. So how could I address this? How could I work past it? I gave this a think, and I think that my answer is to work through a resource that I think is really amazing, and I intend to do a mini review of at some point. And that is a resource called My Deck Companion. And this is by Tegan over at Animals and Arcana. This is a set of 4 sets of activities designed for kind of 4 weeks to be a month-long deck study to work with tarot or oracle, a deck of your choice, to get to know that deck, to explore it in different kinds of ways. I think that I would maybe benefit from working through this My Deck Companion again. I've already gone through it once with a different deck with this, because I think that I need to almost figure out how I can read this as an oracle instead of trying to use it as a tarot because of these quartz. So that's 3 decks that I haven't been using much lately, and that is my deck recheck. I hope to see more folks do VRs to this tag. I think it's a really interesting one. If you have any of these decks, if you have any suggestions for me or recommendations for me about working with these decks, please do let me know in the comments, or let me know if there's a deck that you're trying to work back into your collection that's kind of fallen out of rotation and why that is. I would love to talk decks with you. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks again to Luna for starting the tag. And I will see you all again soon.